I'm sure that we can all recognize the stunning and luminous artwork on the screen right now. That's right, it's Gustav Klimt's infamous masterpiece, The Kiss. The gold-accented oil paintings of Austrian symbolist painter Gustav Klimt are commonly associated with the naturalistic beauty of the Art Nouveau or New Art period that emerged in Europe in the late 1800s. Klimt is also credited with being a founding member of the progressive Viennese Secession and pioneering the beautiful Golden Epoch. This era in art history was one filled with the use of naturalistic motifs and symbols, undulating line work, and of course, intricate ornamentation, rejecting the rigid stylistic conventions of its time and instead conveying a range of unique and naturalistic themes. Today, however, we will not be taking a look at the Kiss, but another Klimt that, in my opinion, is equally as beautiful and equally as evocative. The Three Ages of Women. This 1905 oil painting is a poignant depiction of the female experience. In it, we see illustrated our titular Three Ages of Women, a blushing young mother holding her innocently sleeping infant, and a seemingly devastated older woman, all of whom are encased in a sea of intricate symbols that are simply so classic of Klimt's style. Thematically, The Three Ages of Women centers on the cyclical nature of life and death, and the passage of time as we traverse it through our Three Ages of Women, from infancy to motherhood to old age. Here, Klimt also sneakily comments on the societal female experience and the often toxic nature of beauty standards. Well, you may ask, how exactly does Klimt make these themes apparent to us as viewers? Well, in an artwork like this one, or any for that matter, formal qualities like line, shape, color, and composition play vital roles in conveying ideas to audiences. Basically, they're serving to us as Klimt's means of visual communications, and for me personally, have what have allowed this piece to retain its relevance and its meaning for so long, even if Klimt may not be here today to explain it to us. In approaching a work like this one, it's important that we first zoom out and try to take a look at the bigger picture, or what we could call the composition. This composition is the interaction between all of the different visual elements that Klimt presents to us. A running principle that I see him use here is the principle of contrast, that Klimt applies both formally and conceptually in order to really emphasize the disparity between how these women are treated because of their different ages. Let's first address the physical composition itself. We can see that Klimt uses a very obvious central vertical divide in order to separate the women, reinforcing the variance between old age and youth. The composition is also ever so slightly imbalanced and more dominant on the side of the mother and child. I believe that this is no mere coincidence, and that Klimt has chosen to give mother and child a slightly higher visual weight to allude to how they overshadow their older counterpart, even in society's eyes. Klimt's use of contrast also just doesn't stop there, and extends beautifully into his pattern background, where we see him use chromatic contrast. The warm and black-dominated background element behind the older woman creates a sense of ominousness that so heavily juxtaposes the cool and playful hues that back our mother and child. After having formed a base of knowledge from taking a look at that composition, I think it's also important that we isolate certain elements of it that are symbols in order to really derive some very nuanced and implied meanings about this artwork. What's very interesting here is that Klimt presents to us a series of biological symbols or motifs, reflecting each age of women. I believe we've done so to show us that even though aging itself may be a biological process, it is often one that is warped by society to impose their opinions onto women, regardless of their age. Let's start off with the symbols of protozoal cells. The older woman is separated from her younger counterparts, using this irregularly shaped form. Placing that into Klimt's biological context and inspiration, we can note it's supposed to be an icon for a protozoal cell. Protozoa are parasites and often used as symbols of decay. This is amplified by Klimt and the use of the shape almost resembling a prison cell or a coffin, really adding to that air of entrapment and suffocation we feel when we look at this desolate old woman. Contrastingly, The rhythmic concentric circle patterns that back our mother and child are iconography for human egg cells, universal indicators of fertility, birth, and reproduction. In my opinion, the bubble-like manner in which they've been presented to us really adds to the visual harmony and playful fluidity of this side of the piece. They may even allude to ideas of proliferation or abundance. Thinking on those lines, we can note the bright daisy flowers that adorn our young mother's hair. These symbolize spring and thus fertility, and this context may even represent the rebirth of this woman into a new and glorious phase of her life. Furthermore, the way in which an artist chooses to apply their medium can speak multitudes. So let's take a look at Klimt's masterful technique in this artwork. What fascinates me here is how Klimt really draws attention to his own rendering by creating these striking and varying degrees of realism throughout the artwork. Let me explain. If we look at the old woman's skin, we can note that it's hyperrealistically rendered in comparison to the rest of the artwork. We see her gnarled veins and her protruding joints that Klimt manages to emphasize through his intricate and masterful use of depth and line. He gives her skin a rough and uneven texture that shows the effects of her age. Klimt also here applies layered rendering with cooler undertones to create a sickly and fragile appearance associated with old age. Our mother and child, however, are contrastingly having smooth skin with extremely subtle contours and an even texture. They are both also beautifully flushed with an intense coral hue, giving them this air of youthful vivacity that once again heavily juxtaposes the almost distressed appearance of the old woman's skin. As we've just seen, texture and technique and the application of paint can really convey and bring out some very raw and intense emotions and ideas. But what's the cleverest thing about this piece, in my opinion, is how Klimt uses line, both real and implied, in order to convey some very nuanced and implicit meanings about the three ages of women. To understand that a little better, let's inspect the postures of our three women. The older woman, as we can see, is in a hunched-over posture. Her hair covers her face and her hands cover her eyes in despair. It's almost as if she's trying to anonymize herself, to hide from something. Looking a little closer, we see that Klimt has very carefully constructed this posture, using a series of convex and concave curved lines. These lines exaggerate the effect of old age on the woman's body. The arc of her back and the curvature of her stomach are almost to an unnatural or even gruesome degree, possibly reflecting the shallow and gruesome view of her that society has. Overall, that posture evokes feelings of surrender, entrapment, and the fear of the passing of time and the inevitability of death that looms for this old woman. Mother and child, however, are held together in a warm embrace. Over here, implied or imaginary lines are created from where the mother and child's head meet up until their shoulders. In turn, that creates a stable triangular vector with the crook of the mother's arm lovingly around her baby. This closed and stable use of line, in comparison to the open and ambiguous curves used for the older woman, evokes senses of warmth, protectiveness, and safety that reflect the beauty of motherhood and the guarded period of infancy. Having completed this valuable formal and conceptual analysis of the three ages of women, I hope that we're all able to turn our initial perceptions of this piece into very much informed interpretations of it. Speaking of interpretations, let's now look at two of the dominant interpretations of this stunning allegorical Klimt in the art world today. The first interpretation is one that sees Klimt's portrayal of these women as inherently misogynistic. This one believes that he is almost perpetuating toxic societal standards by isolating the older woman and thus glorifying the idea of youth. However, the second opinion, which is the one that I strongly resonate with, is that the three ages of women is a timeless and complex commentary on the female experience. I believe that rather than perpetuating these toxic beliefs, Klimt in fact only reflects the mistreatment and objectification that women face in our society. The way I see it, when these three women close their eyes, they're not submissively avoiding the gaze of the viewer, but rather attempting to protect themselves from the penetrating gaze of social judgment itself. Thank you.